Wow, Superman!
Hello, citizen. Thank you for your call.
I'm so excited. Are you ready to save the day?
No need, it's already been done.
What?
Yes, well, you see, when I got here, first I broke down the door with my mighty fist, and then I went up to Lex Luthor and I said, Lex, this is the last time you do this in my city. So then I did a backflip and I snapped.
Wait. What are you doing?
Well, I'm just telling you the story about how I saved the day. That is what you wanted me to do, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I wanted to watch you save the day.
Oh, come on now. It's just as exciting to hear about my deeds rather than just see it, correct?
I'm just gonna go play video games or something. What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Elementary Season 7, Episode 7, From Russia with Drugs. Instead of with love. It's not that great of a pun. And this wasn't that great of an episode. It's weird because most of this season, the case that they've been working on in each individual episode has not really been that interesting, and the outside story has been pretty interesting. So it's almost felt like I'd rather be focusing on the outside story than whatever case they're trying to solve. In this one, it was the exact opposite. I mean, the case still was the same as what I'm used to seeing, where we don't really follow a lot of the steps and logic that they take. We just sort of jump into, all right, here's the stuff we discovered off screen. But I like the idea of it. I think the actual story of the case and why they did what they did, why the killers did what they did, I think it was a nice little twist. Because throughout the cases, they're figuring out all this stuff, like with the fentanyl-laced inhaler and all of that. There's all these questions being answered, and it feels like we're getting closer to the truth. But ultimately, there still is the question of, why was the money laced with fentanyl to begin with? If it wasn't from a stash house, if it wasn't from some criminal thing. And so to find out the truth about their contract with the DEA and all of this. So it made a lot of sense. The only thing that felt a little bit shaky logic-wise was the fact that Deneen managed to kill Cecile. I don't really understand the chain of events that led to that, but everything else I thought worked really well. Again, outside of the formulaic, they just solve stuff off screen and we have to be along for the ride. Outside of that, I think the rest of the case was pretty enjoyable. But the stuff on the outside, unfortunately, was basically just a PSA. I've talked about this in other reviews of shows that tend to do these stories that are basically PSAs of just like, whether it's social justice, whether it's empowering women, empowering people of color, empowering LGBTQ, like these stories, they're not interesting because they are just PSAs. That's all they are. And for the people who are represented by these stories, maybe they do watch and maybe they do get excited to see these stories and feel represented, empowered, and all this stuff. Maybe they do. I don't know. I've never asked anybody who watches these shows that belong to these groups, like if a woman watched this show and she saw this episode, would she watch it and go, yeah, get that douchebag Captain Dwyer? Or would it be like, hey, can we please get back to solving mysteries? That's what this show is about. Why are we spending time on this other thing that doesn't really matter to the overall story? But to me, anytime I see this, it always just feels so condescending. Like this one is basically, hey, women, if men are treating you wrong in the workplace, have courage and stand up and take a stand against them. And it just feels like you're kind of talking down to women. That's just how I look at it. It feels very like you're speaking to a child, like, hey, you gotta have courage, you can do this. I don't feel like it's ever really written that well. I think the other issue I have with it too is that, first of all, this woman, completely new character. Never seen her before. I found out apparently this is Emily Swallow, so she's the armorer from The Mandalorian, but never seen her before. And Gregson's talking about this is the best cop I have, blah, blah, blah. And that's where I do have an issue. You created this character and are suddenly talking about her as if she's the best thing ever. Why couldn't we have a character that we've seen before? And granted, I don't remember enough about past seasons to know if there was a female cop that they could use, but why not have a character like that? The fact that you had to create this new female character, to me, says you didn't do your job beforehand to set up for this. You didn't have a strong female cop character. You could make the argument, oh, well, Joan's the strong female character. Alongside Belle, you could have had another cop that showed up in most episodes that was a good cop and was very good at what she did, and we could see that instead of having a whole new character to introduce and then build up with words instead of actions because, show don't tell who gives a shit about that, right? And so now all of a sudden I'm supposed to care that she's leaving. I'm supposed to care about her story and care about the fact that Dwyer, who has been nothing but a good guy throughout this entire season, and now all of a sudden it's, no, he's actually a douchebag because he made sexually inappropriate comments. Well, cool. Now you just killed a character that I kind of liked. Like, I knew once Gregson came back, I knew Dwyer was going to leave, but he's been nothing but fine throughout this season. I actually really preferred to have a captain come in, and instead of being like, oh, well, I don't like any of the way this is done, Sherlock, Watson, you guys are doing things weird, so you're gone. I can't stand to look at you. You guys aren't real cops. We could have had a captain like that. Instead, we got a guy that came in and said, hey, you guys do good work. Gregson trusts you. You're good in my book. Do whatever you need. That's awesome. I prefer to have that. So I was really excited to have a guy like Dwyer, and now all of a sudden the show's telling me, no, actually, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's had a lot of stuff where he's been really inappropriate with women. Why do that? To make a statement, no less. Like, if this were something that we're going to play into something else in the season, maybe I'd be more interested. But the fact of the matter is, I know this is the end of Dwyer. We're not going to see him again after this, more than likely. And it was solely done just to make a statement, make a PSA about empowering women in the workplace. Ultimately, this definitely was the worst episode so far this season, and it's disappointing because so far this season has kind of captured my interest, and I do want to know more about what's going on with Reichenbach, which I did find out in between the last review and then watching this episode, that Reichenbach was something from Sherlock. And I couldn't remember what it was, and then I looked it up. I'm like, Sherlock, Reichenbach, and sure enough, I think it was the fall of Reichenbach or something like that. Reichenbach Falls. That's what it was. And I don't remember the significance of it. I'm pretty sure that the BBC Sherlock did have an episode about Reichenbach. So maybe subconsciously that's why I suspected Odin from the beginning, outside of the fact that the actor just plays a good bad guy. But I was really excited to see more about his story, and now I'm getting this episode out of nowhere that just completely pumps the brakes on everything. So hopefully that's the only episode that does that this season, but we'll see. Moving on to the next one, I'll see you there in a sec. And now episode 8, Misunderstood. Slightly better than the last pun. Fine episode overall. I think it's one of those that if I had been keeping up with the show basically when it was coming out and maybe didn't take so much time in between seasons, maybe I would remember this story a bit more, and maybe I would remember this character and feel more connected to it. But as it is, I don't really remember her story because I think Sherlock said it had been 4 years previous to this episode, which means I'm guessing season 3, maybe, is when she was involved. So obviously, I barely remember last season. Definitely don't remember her story at all. Anytime I'm returning to shows like this, where I've not watched in a while, maybe I need to go back and do a quick rewatch of the series, just to remind myself in case they make some references to previous seasons and I've completely forgotten about them. But no, I think this story was fine. Granted, there's still no connection to what's going on with Reichenbach, so a little disappointed that we're kind of ignoring what's going on with him. There was a reference to him where Sherlock talked about the offer that he made to him and Joan, but we've not talked about that story really or progressed it at all in the past 2, and that's kind of disappointing. I was really hoping that throughout this final season we'd get maybe a little bit more progression in each episode. Obviously, they're going to stick to their individual case per episode type of setup because that's how the show works. But I was really hoping that maybe we would see a lot more progression with the main story than I feel like we've seen in past seasons with this show. Like I remember, I think it was Michael was the name of the serial killer from last season. I remember with his story, one thing that was really frustrating was there were several episodes. In fact, there was one point where he left the country and we didn't talk about him for several episodes after that. And all of a sudden he popped back up and was like, I'm back. And I remember being really frustrated with that because it was such an interesting story. I wanted to see progression being made. Same thing here. Reichenbach and everything he's doing, pretty interesting. I would like to see progression being made with that story, but it feels like now all of a sudden we're just taking a step back, and last episode we did the PSA with the Bree cop, and now we've got Cassie, whatever her new name is going to be. We've got her showing up, and the outside story from the case is mostly focused on her and figuring out why she's there with Sherlock, what her ultimate goal is. And while that is more interesting than what we got in the last episode, it's still not as interesting as the stuff with Reichenbach and the stuff I'd prefer to see there. And I will also say that the case in this one didn't make a whole lot of sense, and granted, maybe this is a bigger deal than I know of, or it was back in, I think this is 2019 when this came out, but the fact that there was such a big focus on baby food kind of feels a little weird. I don't know if this was actually a thing that was happening, but it did just feel like this was not as big of a thing as they made it out to be in this episode. Now there's a ring of people trying to sell it for cheaper or something. I don't know. It feels odd. And on top of that, the solution to the case felt kind of cheap as well. Like we mentioned several guys that could benefit from this woman being murdered before an investigation being done. And then they pick the one that's most likely. Cassie goes and blackmails him to set up a meet to have him try to kill her. And then they catch the man that was going to kill her. And then that I guess also implicates him. It was just very sudden and rushed through. And it felt very similar in that way to the one with, can't remember the name of the guy now, but the one with the moonshine being made and the hog that got killed. Like I said, in that one, it felt very rushed. It felt like the emotional impact of solving the case was just sort of looked over and we didn't get to really experience it. Here, kind of the same thing. They catch the hitman that this guy hired to kill Cassie. We don't even get to see the main guy getting arrested. We just skip over that and say, yeah, hitman's gonna to sell him out. We're good. And it feels very rushed, and it feels like we're not getting that satisfaction of seeing the bad guy being forced to pay for his crimes. I don't know. It feels like an odd decision that takes away some of the satisfaction of solving the case, in my opinion. So in summary, yes, this was a better episode than the last one, but it's still not really interesting compared to a lot of the story that we've been getting so far this season. So hopefully we'll pick that story back up in the next episode, but we'll see when we get there in just a second. And finally, episode 9, On the Scent. This was a pretty standard one. The stuff on the outside is finally getting back a little bit toward Reichenbach and what he's doing with Joan looking into this case that apparently he's involved with. And Sherlock finally shares with her the truth about what happened with the NSA, which I do find a little weird because the way that he shared with her what McNally told him, the way he shared it, he delivered it in a way that was almost like, hey, this is what he said, so we know what that means. And yet, apparently, she took it at face value. I don't know if that was a directing issue or if that was a writing thing. I personally took it like he is telling her we were told to back off. Yeah, so he tells her in this one, she's still looking into it because, of course, she is. They're not just going to let it drop. And we see at the end of this episode, Reichenbach finds out about it. So there are some steps being taken. It just doesn't feel like we're moving at the speed that I was hoping the story would. But now I'm hoping that we'll finally start to see the story pick up a little bit of momentum and actually have some things happen. But the case in this one was just pretty standard. As soon as they introduced the guy, I knew it was going to be him. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. I didn't know what it was all going to lead to. But they introduced this guy who's got a bite mark on his hand, and he's got all these phones, and he's acting a little shady, and they arrest him for the stealing phones. And for some reason in my mind, all I could think was that was super random. That's not going to be it. He's going to be the bad guy too. Has to be. But all the stuff with the drug sniffing dog and the drug cartel and all of that, it felt unnecessary, to be honest, because a lot of it once again felt like we were biding our time throughout most of the episode. We were wasting time looking at these other avenues until eventually we find the proper one, which is whoever killed her took the dog to steal the drugs, and that's what it's all been leading toward. To me, it seems like they have a lot of ideas for cases, but they don't know how to execute them properly. And so they just have all of these random things happening throughout the episode, these random different suspects, these random different, well, what if it was about this moments? And it all just feels pointless until we get to that final bit of information that they find out. And again, not showing us the process of them solving these cases takes away a lot of the satisfaction of these mystery shows that a lot of other crime shows have figured out. We like to be included in. We like to see what's going on. We like to see the information being found and see how that all pieces together. Not, hey, we got this piece of information. Well, here's the bad guy because we found this, this, and this that points to them. Boom, we're done. And I know I keep beating that dead horse, but that really is kind of the big criticism that I have for most of this season. Is every case I have that issue. I feel like I'm not really involved in it. I feel like I'm just watching from the outside and they're just saying all this information instead of me getting to see it. And again, show don't tell. There's a reason why that's one of the rules in film. Because another rule that exists, actions speak louder than words, there's a reason why that's a thing. Because what you do often means more than what you say. And so whenever you come to this, when I'm hearing all of this stuff, it's not really clicking for me. It's not connecting in my mind. I'm just like, oh, okay, so you guys did all this stuff. Cool. I guess they solved the case. woo. But if I actually see them finding these clues and then finding out the information about the person that connects it, or even if you just naturally give me that information. So for instance, in this case, if you show us naturally that there is a connection between the guy and his sister, then we can kind of piece together for ourselves. We can kind of be along for the ride as Joan and Sherlock, they have these connections. The one where they had the fentanyl on the money and Joan gets the piece of paper off the wall that connects the dots for her. We don't get to see that. We just see them all of a sudden showing up at the office of, I don't remember what the lady's name or what their business was called, but we see them showing up there. I'm like, okay, so she's the killer. So what was on the paper? Go ahead and tell me, since I don't get to see it for myself. I just don't understand why the writers, the directors, whoever's behind this show, why they think it's more entertaining to show characters talking about how they figured it out instead of actually showing us the characters figuring it out. I just don't get it. It feels lazy to me. And I feel like that's why Elementary hasn't really captured everybody's interest the way that, say, Sherlock or even Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock movies, the way that those worked so well. Elementary is not on that same level. I don't hear people talk about Elementary that often, and that's probably a lot of the reason why, is because it's not as entertaining, it's not as interesting to the audience because the writing is just so simplistic. So anyway, that's my little rant on all of this stuff. Again, I know I've talked about this for quite a few episodes this season, but I think that's kind of the final rant that I just wanted to hammer in that point. When I don't mention it for the rest of the season, that's the reason why. I've ranted about it. I'm done talking about it. I will move on now and focus on the other stuff, which might admittedly make these reviews a lot shorter, but it just means I get through it quicker. But anyways, with all of that being said, those are my thoughts on these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What did you think of these 3? Are my opinions valid about this show? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Elementary reviews. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of reviews on here as well as some Let's Plays, so check those out if you have time. But until next time, hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.